Hello, good afternoon everybody and welcome to Infinite Learning's webinar today. We're delighted to be joined once again by Natalie Crew. She's going to be speaking today about bilingual and multilingual classrooms, supporting young language learners across the curriculum. It's a particularly interesting topic because it kind of works at a couple of levels, because obviously we have students who are bilingual, but also teachers who are bilingual, and actually, in fact, Natalie's currently delivering a bespoke version of this programme to some schools in Abu Dhabi, where they are actually delivering it in a bilingual manner as well. So they've got translators involved. So it really is absolutely living and breathing the essence of the title of the course and of today's webinar. I'd just like to start off by saying, before we sort of look at a little bit more detail around the webinar, that we have been experiencing some technical glitches, as is the case these days in our new online world, totally out of our control, I'm afraid. And hopefully, touch wood, so far we seem to be okay. But if we lose connection with Natalie or GoToWebinar fails us, we'll probably then at that point cut and reschedule. But hopefully that won't be the case, and we'll carry on and enjoy the webinar. Today's session is going to last about 30 minutes, but we are going to allow 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. So please add those into your chat box. You'll see on your control panel for GoToWebinar, there's a chat box there. And you can please ask any questions, and we'll come to those at the end. Also, other questions, just to preempt some that are often asked, will we receive a recording of the webinar? Yes, you will. That will come out tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Along with your certificate of attendance. Anything else? Yes, resources, they will also be sent. A PDF of this PowerPoint will be sent immediately after this webinar with links to related courses and so on. So just a little bit about today's webinar. So many teachers who find themselves in the position of teaching bilingual and multilingual students may not have taken the time to really investigate what these terms mean and how bilingualism and multilingualism affect language development and the impact they have on the way classrooms operate. This short webinar will introduce you to the main points, which will be expanded upon in an upcoming course designed to guide you into a deeper understanding of bilingual and multilingual classrooms, how bilingualism and multilingualism can be described and defined, the challenges they present, and the richness they bring to teachers and learners. In addition to learning about some of the big ideas, you will be invited to ask questions and provide input, sharing your areas of interest and helping us to hone in on what is important to you. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Natalie.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's really nice to be here, and after we had our little moment of wondering how our internet was going, I'm feeling positive that things are looking good, and I warmly welcome you to our session. In the conversation that I've been having with Rebecca and the Infinite Learning team, we've been talking about this as a mini webinar, in that it's not really designed as so much as a learning session for you, but as rather as a way to give you an idea about the main points we'll be covering in the course, in the upcoming course in March, and to see two things, to tell you what I believe from my 33 years of experience in education, 30 of them in international schools, working in these bilingual and multilingual classrooms. What I believe are the big topics, the big issues. A lot of us have fallen into this kind of teaching and haven't had a lot of time to really investigate what it means. So we do what is wonderful, we learn as we go, but sometimes we make mistakes along the way that perhaps we learn from, but they can be detrimental to the students who were the little guinea pigs. And so we can sort of preempt some of those potential mistakes we might make in front of students, just because we're not really understanding the nature of the language learning process that's going on for them. But also this session is designed to get your input, because as I'm sure you know, as teachers, having, knowing the prior knowledge of the learners and being able to get their input at the beginning helps design a course or a learning experience that's more customized and built around the learners who are there. And so rather than it being too generic, we can take, that's the point of the questions at the end. We'll be inviting you to say, what would you like to learn more about, and what's going on for you at the moment that presents some challenges that you'd like to have a chance to discuss and share ideas about during the course. Okay, so we'll move on. We're talking about young language learners, and so when you see this list of who might be joining us here, we're talking about early years teachers. You might, depending on whether you talk about ECC or early years, you may be thinking about even 18-month-old children up to 3 years, or 3 and 4 and 5 years. But because we're talking about language learning, young learners could even be considered children who are learning a first or a second or additional language, and so they can be considered young learners in the stages of their bilingualism on a continuum. And so I think that we can be really saying we're talking to teachers of infants right up until perhaps 12 years of age. So grade 1 to grade 6 classrooms, or year 1 to year 5, depending on where you're from and how you name your classes. But I'm thinking of up to 12-year-olds. Certainly, people who might be interested in joining the course could be EAL specialists or ESL specialists, or you might, these days we're using that term, English language learning specialists. Of course, classroom teachers are also taking that role as well. Special needs educators, speech therapists. We do quite a bit of work on oral sound progression, how we learn different sounds at different stages in different languages, how some sounds are not present in some languages, and what we need to do to support our young language learners when certain sounds don't appear in different languages. Obviously, one of the people, the teachers in a role that I think is so vital and often overlooked in schools are our librarians, who are dealing so much with supporting our language learning in the schools. And also specialist teachers. So we're all language teachers, whether we're teaching mathematics or physical education. If we're using language, we're teaching language either implicitly or explicitly. So really thinking about the language structures we use and how we support our learners, even in specialist subjects. And certainly we're looking at people in leadership roles too. How are you leading your teams, and what messages are your teachers getting about your language learning policy? So coordinators and school leaders. The idea of this course really, and today's mini webinar, is for you to see what I've got in mind. And also for us to personalize, customize, and contextualize according to the people who are here interested in joining the webinar, the full course, the live course. Now, the only real connection that you and I have had until now is that you read a description that I wrote about this course. And so I thought it would be a good idea just to revisit that. Excuse me, I try not to put too much text on a page, particularly with bilingual and multilingual, in bilingual and multilingual contexts, but you have all read this description, so I just would like to share with you the pieces in orange which I think might have brought you to this course or to this webinar to find out more. So it's the statement that Rebecca just read out, and we're really looking at defining the terms. What does bilingualism and multilingualism mean? We'll also look a little bit at monolingualism. It's more and more rare that people in the world are monolingual, really, because you can also be a passive bilingual. You can be a person who's exposed to languages, so you're still considered bilingual, even if you're just at the receptive listening stage. So it's rare that especially teachers in international schools have not encountered other languages that they can you know, say some words in and follow a little bit. So I think we could probably all say we're on a bilingual continuum. That we're going to, after we get into the definitions, we're going to look at what classrooms look like and feel like, and remembering that the title of this this course is not just talking about students, it's talking about teachers as well. So our classrooms are bilingual and multilingual at the teacher level as well as at the student level. And so that presents also some challenges and some extra richness that we can you know, pull into our planning and our work with the students and with each other as colleagues. We want to also be able to, we're going to be looking at things like text types. We're going to be looking at what kinds of ways we can observe students and particularly their oral language, both from a receptive and a productive viewpoint. And I've got some nice tracking devices that I'll be sharing with you to even checklists, just as you're listening to students, to really hone in on developing your observation skills, because oral language is often, it's where language starts, but it's often a really hard one to assess. And so I've got some nice tools for us to use to get a deeper understanding of how the students are developing as language learners. Our main outcomes will be to just explore what goes on, particularly at a conceptual level, when language is being learned. So we will be looking at the importance of mother tongue, and how, although we are not, for most of us, we're not teaching students in their mother tongue, there's a lot of leverage that we can get from acknowledging the mother tongue exists and using the mother tongue often to introduce or give children opportunities to demonstrate that they've got prior knowledge of a concept and that they can hook a new language onto what they already understand conceptually in their mother tongue. We're going to be looking at the difference between language learning and language acquisition. And so we look at formal and functional language learning, formal being where we get into syntax and grammar and so on, and the structure of language, and acquisition being the more natural way that we learn language, just by being in an environment where that language is being used, not so much taught as a language, but being used as a living language. And we look at how we can balance our planning so that we can plan times when, yes, language learners need to learn some rules, but also they can acquire in natural ways that we can plan for. And we're also going to be looking, it will depend, this is where I'd like to customize for you around your learners and your interests, what kind of text types we can look at. People often think of introducing students through narrative storytelling kinds of text types, although there's a lot of research that shows that informational text types, which use the infinitive form of verbs like put and draw and move, those sorts of verbs it's really useful, simple structure for them to learn first. So we can start with informational text to give children good, useful structures. So we'll be talking about the theory behind that and the practice, the application. So when I talk about practice and application, that last point is there for you to develop a repertoire of great strategies. Ones I'll share with you, ones you'll share with each other, and ones you'll go out and find and bring back, so that we'll be actively researching strategies and building a bank of strategies that you can use, and remembering that a lot of those strategies will work in your context with some adaptations, and we shouldn't expect that all strategies, even if they're well researched, will work for everyone. So your repertoire will be very customized to your context and to your teaching style and the style of your learners. Just a little bit of an overview here, just to have a look at our 4 sessions. We'll work together for 1.5 hours in each session over 4 dates. And so those sessions are divided into those areas I've just been speaking about, and I'm going to just elaborate a little bit on that now. As I said before, this is not really designed. Don't get frustrated if you don't feel like you learn anything today. This is really to pique your interest in learning more as the course rolls out. So the last little point on the screen here is really important to me, and I hope it is to you, that we are learners in a theoretical sense, and we understand, we want to learn more about the pedagogy and the rationale, but also we really need to be practitioners and try things out. And so a big part of what I call the extended learning between the sessions will be you trying things out with your students and bringing back your observations. So one of the big pieces that I think is really useful is for teachers to think about where they are themselves and where their students are on a bilingual continuum. There are many forms of a bilingual continua, and there are many stages. Remembering, as a lot of us know, learning is not always linear. And so these, a way of representing something like language learning on a line is not really a realistic representation of the way the learning happens, but it does help us sort of follow and track some stages. And also remembering that might depend on whether we're talking about the bics and calps of language. We'll be looking at that. If that doesn't mean anything to you right now, don't worry. But we'll be looking at the difference between social language and academic language. So we may have a child who's on the continuum at they're strongly bilingual in a social sense, but they may not be so strongly bilingual in an academic sense. They don't have the words in their second or additional language that they need academically. When I say academic languages, also it can be things like big and small, hot and cold, happy and sad. They're academic learning words that the children may know in their mother tongue, but they may not know in English or formal Arabic Fusha, for example. So a passive bilingual is going to be someone who's receptively following a language but not participating orally. A semi-bilingual is someone who can be considered, especially as a young learner, can be considered slightly at risk because they don't yet have a strong mother tongue, and they're being introduced to second and or additional languages before they've got a strong grasp on their own language. A lot of our students, I think, in international schools fit into that category. Coordinate bilinguals, who are those people who have learned one language as a mother tongue. They have a strong and dominant mother tongue, but they have added another language, and they sort of see their languages as separate. And the way that I explain that is that my husband's French. I'm making progress in French, but when I have to use some French structures grammatically that put words in a different order, my brain feels like it's wrong. And so I haven't sort of taken on French as a natural language. I'm learning it, and I have to tell myself to put words in different order. So that's a coordinate bilingual. Whereas a compound or dominant bilingual is someone thinking of a compound rocket, someone who's learned their languages, both of their languages, usually from infancy, or maybe more than two languages, and they've connected both or all of their languages at a conceptual level. So they don't, when they think of the word orange in one language, all their other words for orange in other languages are there and present. They don't have to go looking for them. Okay, and then we've got ambibilingual, often called equibilingual, which is where someone is so proficient socially and academically in a second language or in both languages that they are non-accented and are perceived by native speakers of both languages as being a native speaker. Probably the goal, but not realistic for most of us. When we look at describing language learning classrooms, this will be a big thing that we look at in the course. We'll be looking at what is a bilingual classroom like and a multilingual classroom. And I really find that quotation at the bottom of the slide here very useful to remember often, that when our language is limited, our learning is limited. And I'm sure you know that if you've been ever in a situation where you felt isolated by language, you can switch off. And so what we're trying to do is switch learners on through language, and not just learning language, not just learning about language, but learning through language. And so these ideas here, bilingual classrooms, really it's about two dominant languages in a classroom, and multilingual classrooms where there are a variety of languages being spoken. Usually there will be one dominant, and that will be the language that's often used as the language of instruction, but there are a lot of languages going on. This is where children are translating for one another, and even where teachers are speaking two or more languages. And for us, what's going to be really interesting in our course is where's the overlap, because we may have some bilingual children and some mono or multilingual children. Sorry, there's a little mistake there. Multilingual children. So what we're looking for is the overlap in the middle, and that's what we'll discuss and come up with as a group together. Is where's that richness in the middle, so that we're meeting the needs of all the language learners and using all of the skills of the language teachers as well in the best way we can. We'll be talking. You'll be defining and deciding whether your students are bilingual or multilingual, and that will be engaging you, as I said earlier, as a researcher as well as a practitioner. So you'll be engaging in academic and professional discussion, and also looking at where are the application points, where are those points where you can take some theory and put it in practice into some nice simple strategies. One thing that is really important, particularly if you're working in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, in the Emirates and surrounds, is this idea of diglossia. Don't worry if it's the first time you've heard that term. It may be, or it may be something you're really very well aware of. If you are an Arabic speaker, you will know about it. This is where we have two forms of one language that are being used within an area, a region, or a school, and they are linguistically different enough or distant enough to be considered two languages, even though they're thrown into the basket in terms of nomenclature. They're being named as Arabic. And so in the Gulf, we have a form of Arabic called Khaliji, which is the colloquial form of Arabic that's being spoken by most of the students as their mother tongue, and it's the language that surrounds them in their home. It's the language they've learned as they've learned their concepts. So, for example, as I said earlier, hot and cold, they already know that. They've got prior knowledge in their Khaliji, but they may not have it in formal Fusa, formal Arabic, and they may not have it in English. So in the community, in that box you'll see there, in the community that you're working in, for most of you, there will be the formal Arabic and the Gulf Arabic. And I think this is really important for teachers to understand, that when your students are going to their Arabic lesson, they're not going to mother tongue. They're going to a formal MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, or Fusa on the right, the written Arabic, liturgical in the sense that it is the language of religion. We might say, if you wanted to look at other contexts, you might say Latin in the way it connects to religion. Also Greek. For example, Latin is no longer a living language, but it is used in some religious ceremonies still. The difference in the Gulf is that Arabic is a great example of a language where the language and religion are so connected and so culturally embedded that everybody is using that as one of their languages. But then we have Egyptian Arabic, we have Moroccan Arabic, we have Jordanian Arabic, we have Syrian Arabic, and we have Khaliji, which is the Gulf Arabic. And so that is the language that your children, that the students who speak, most of your students in the Gulf will be speaking that as mother tongue. So it's really important to realize that when they go to their language learning lesson in Arabic, it's actually different enough to their mother tongue to be considered a second language or an additional language. Okay, one of the things we'll also look at in our course is, as I said earlier, whether your school is focusing on language learning or language acquisition. And so we'll be talking about examples and analogies of what it's like when you learn language formally, when you look at verbs and nouns and syntax and grammar and punctuation, and when you look at language acquisition, which is being exposed to language in context and making sense of it, rather than having, it's more of a whole language approach, that one. And as I said earlier, there's a place for both of those. We'll also be looking at bringing together some of the theory about language into a model like this. So we're looking at learning language, learning about language, and learning through language. That's where our text types come in. So we're looking at that overlap. How can we have a whole language classroom where we're teaching graphophonics and syntax and semantics in an overlapping way? And that's where text comes alive. And how do we, what kinds of strategies can we use with our students? That's another graphic that you'll see. We'll be coming back to that. Don't worry about that too much, but this is just breaking down or presenting in a different way what I just shared with you. We'll look at teacher attitudes as well. We need to remember that bilingual and multi-children are not special needs students, usually. Sometimes we have that question as teachers, is it a language problem or a learning or a language challenge, difficulty, or a learning issue? And so sometimes we have to get past the language to see what's going on behind the language brain. But we look at our attitudes. We look at whether we're working in speak English only schools and what that means for us, as what kind of message we're giving our students. And that's not from a critical point of view. It's just acknowledging the situation that exists in our school and what that means for our teaching and planning and assessment. We look at prejudice about language, especially when we're in the Arabic context where we have high and low versions of a language, what message we're giving about that as we deal with mother tongue and additional languages. And we're looking at how language is learned, and language is not learned just by repetition of words. Language is really learned in context. We'll also be looking at whether you've got, don't worry about, there's a lot of information here, but I will tell you that heteroglossic view is that languages, or in the box in the middle there, languages are varieties of the same species. So language is language. Whereas a monoglossic point of view talks about the idea that this is one language and I can separate it from the other one, which leads to things like don't speak Arabic today, just speak English. And what we are asking people then to do, our young learners, is to stop all the language learning that they know. And so that can cause some delay. So we look at, we investigate your beliefs and what you think about language learning and what your school believes too. I want to get to your questions, and I was aware that I've got a lot of information here, but I was just hoping that some of this information is going to help get your interest and help you think of questions you'd like to ask too. So we'll be talking about the vital role of mother tongue, not that you're expected to teach mother tongue, but just what we can do with the power of mother tongue. And we'll also be talking about translanguaging and how valuable it is to let children be able to speak a variety of languages so that they can get to the English and hook into the English and the Arabic formally. So that's a big view of what we'll be looking at in the course from my point of view. Now, what I'd like to do is invite your questions and thoughts and comments based on, here are some little prompts that I'll give you, but maybe you've already got some questions that your question doesn't have to fit into these next little bullet points, but it might help you sort of craft a question. So what are your questions about bilingual, multilingual classrooms? What's the biggest challenge that you currently face in meeting the language learning needs of your students? How do you learn best? And this is at your own level as a professional learner. How do you learn best? What do you like to do in professional learning situations, and what are you not interested in doing as a professional learner. This will help me design more to interest you in the course. So I'll hand you back to Rebecca to see how we go with questions and what kind of input you'd like to have now.
Thank you so much, Natalie. As always, a wonderful and always so fascinating webinar. As an ex-language teacher, this is particularly interesting to me. Some of the elements, I mean, it was all fascinating to me. I love the fact that you mentioned and highlighted librarians. I think you're absolutely right. They are sometimes an unsung hero of schools, and often a safe place for students to go as well. And I think, yeah, they play a vital role above and beyond being a librarian in its traditional sense. But I think the bigger point there was that actually this course is relevant for everybody that works in a school, because we're all language teachers. We all use language, and therefore, you know, the more of us that are aware of the complexities and the power of language, you know, in both a positive and therefore also potentially a negative way, you know, that's so important that we can all come on board and broaden our horizons. I thought that was really important. Some of the other points for me were that, you know, this course is, yes, you're going to learn some theory and context and content, and all our courses will aim to do that, and of course be research based in that evidence, but that you'll actually then go on and do your own research and put that context or content into your own context, and action the learning, and really do start to become your own researcher and find out in your own context what works and what doesn't and why, and have conversations around that. So I thought that was really important. And I actually just the whole element of language and learning, and are they separate or are they mixed, and how have they evolved, and what does that mean, and when should we use them? For me, so many questions, and certainly if I was currently working in a school with these kind of students, and actually so relevant to the UAE. Yes, with the Arabic and the English, but we have so many multilingual, bilingual learners from so many different nationalities. Any of you listening that have you know, attended National Day celebrations in any of our schools, you'll see how wonderfully rich they are with all the different cultures and languages. So such a relevant course. And you know, a big thank you to Natalie. As I say, you'll receive an email directly after this course with a link to the course itself. So if you'd like more information about that, just at least go have a little look. And there's also a handout in the webinar here, which you can see in your control panel, and we'll also email that to you as well. Are any of you keen to ask any questions? We seem to have quite a shy bunch today. I don't see any here. What we always do say is if something occurs to you after the webinar, please do feel free to send those through to me, and I'll forward to Natalie, and she's always very good at responding. If you'd like any information about Natalie working with you at a bespoke level, which is what she's doing currently, where she's working with a group of leaders in a group of schools, that also works well. As we said, if there's more people in the same establishment all singing from the same song sheet, then the impact is, you know, is even more important. So do get in touch if you've got any interest in that at all. Learners, hold on. Oh, we have a question. Hold on.
Questions.
How do you support language learners online? Brilliant question, Rebecca.
And I'm assuming that, I mean, that's there's a huge answer there, or there's not necessarily an answer, but we're talking about strategies. And so I'm recording that question because it's one of our newest challenges, and I know that also opens up communication with parents, and particularly around mother tongue and what's going on at home with how parents are supporting students' language learning. There are a lot of strategies that we can share, that I have found other teachers are sharing with me as well, because I'm not currently working in classrooms with children, so I'm always sort of borrowing ideas from other people. So I've got a really nice set of strategies that are sort of adaptations of things we might do in the classroom, particularly for young learners. I know that's really challenging, but I'm writing the question down because I will put, when we look at strategies, I will be putting that into one of the sessions, supporting language learners online. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's obviously a kind of, so many areas have evolved and challenges have evolved through this online forum, yes, in this particular field, but in so many others as well. And certainly they need a bit of unpicking.
Yeah.
So thank you for that question. I'll just see if there's any more. No, I think that's it. So I'm going to say thank you all very much for attending today. I hope you found it useful. As said, you will receive a video of the recording tomorrow, along with your certificate of attendance. And also as a directive to just do a little bit of a questionnaire, just some 3 or 4 short questions. We'd be really grateful if you could complete that for us. Email me with any other queries. And otherwise, we hope you can join us for our next webinar. Actually, we have one in Arabic on Monday of next week, and then we have one on Wednesday of next week as well, which is around growth mindset with James Anderson. So do check out our website for forthcoming webinars, and obviously have a look on our website for all the courses, and you'll get the direct link to Natalie's directly after this webinar. So thank you all for coming. Big thank you to Natalie, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you and have a lovely evening.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.